Okay, now we're going to prepare our lining. So we've got our lining here that's been interfaced, set aside. And when we created the bag, we didn't use the full 5/8 inch seam allowance. So what we need to do with this, I kind of looked at it and it looked like about a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to fold this over a 1/2 inch. I've got my seam guide here. So we'll fold it over a 1/2 inch, and then we're going to go sew this seam down on the sewing machine to lock it down. So let's fold this over and press it. These seam guides are very handy. You can make one out of a fall folder if you need to, mark it at a 1/2 inch, and then use it. Gives you a good, crisp, even hem. And again, a clapper is handy to have also. It really helps set these seams. Okay, there's one side. I'm going to iron the other one over, and then we're going to take it over to the sewing machine, and we're going to, you can do it from this side, just stay right there along the edge and sew that down to keep it down when we sew it into the bag. So let me get this one ironed over, and then I'll meet you over at the sewing machine. Okay, now we're back at the sewing machine, so we're just going to tack this 1/2 inch seam that we ironed over down. Just sew right along the edge of it, nice and evenly. Take my stitch length back to 2.5. Actually, I'm going to go to 3. Let's go to a stitch length of 3. That'll hold it down. And something you use for alignment, I'm keeping this edge even with the inside of this side of the foot, so it's right there. So that gives you a good alignment mark. Just keep it lined up with the inside edge of the foot on the left side of the needle. That'll give you a good even seam as you go down. Okay, that takes care of that side. So once we've done the other one, we'll take it back over and we'll press it, and then we're going to have to true this lining up just the way we did the exterior of the bag. I'm going to update the pattern. I think instead of using 5/8 inch seam allowance here on the side, on the top of the bag, I'm going to go to a 1/2 inch. I think that makes more sense. So I will modify the pattern. So if you've downloaded the pattern and you see the top says 1/2 inch instead of 5/8, you will probably not have to do the truing that I'm having to do here. But I'm covering this because the original pattern had the 5/8, and since several people downloaded it, I want to show them how to address it. Okay, I'm going to sew this second one up, and then I'll meet you back over at the pressing station, and we'll do the ironing of the seam down, and then we'll true it up. Okay, I've pressed down these seams, and one of the things I noticed, you may want to loosen your tension just a little bit when you sew this in, because mine kind of puckered just a little bit. So go ahead and turn your tension dial back about 2 settings, and you just need to tack that down good. So a little bit looser tension will hold it, and it'll keep it from puckering up a little bit. I mean, it's not bad, but I just noticed if I sew this again, I would loosen the tension just a bit. So a little tip for you. Okay, now we need to get our center point just like we did before. So we're going to go ahead and cut our little corner off here. Cut that corner off. And we'll see if that 1/2 inch took care of it, or if we need to true our bag anymore. Okay, so the lining is going to be set back just a bit. So yeah, we're going to have to cut a little bit off. So you're going to bring it back about 1/8 of an inch or so from the edge of the center mark there. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of press this down to give me a reference point, and I'm going to line this one back here up also. Give me a point there. Do the same thing over here. Turn it over, and that kind of shows you we need to clip that little bit off, and we want to clip the same amount off each end. So if you see one end has less, that just means it's not quite lined up right. So what I'll do is I'll come up here and clip that much off, and then I'll do the same thing down here. So let's turn it over. Get my reference point there. And this isn't an exact science. We just want to make sure it squares up nicely. When you're cutting this part, just make sure it stays even with this, that it goes straight in there. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but try to keep it as square as you can. Alright, I'm going to continue to cut about that amount off of this side of each one of these. And be sure and keep a good reference of the one you're cutting so you don't get confused when you turn it over. Now I know we're cutting the top is what we're cutting on each one of these, so you can go ahead and lay it out. And you're going to cut this one, this one, this one, and remember the one you've already got cut, and just cut the same amount off of each one. It doesn't take very much. That one. So this side should be completed now. So that's how we're going to sew it on. We're going to leave it a little bit of a gap there. So we've got that side done. Now we'll do this side. So now what we're going to do is we're going to even up these edges here. And let me do it the other way. It's got to be right sides together. Even up our edges down here and right here. And then we're going to sew across and recreate this the same way we did the outer part of the bag. So put a clip there to hold that in place. Clip there to hold that one in place. Hold that one down. Line up our edge and hold that one down. Now we're going to sew a 5/8 inch seam allowance on this one, where we basically used a 1/2 inch on the outer part of the bag. The idea is this is the inside. We need it a little bit smaller so we have a good snug fit on the inside of the bag. So again, 5/8 inch seam allowance there and there. And I'll meet you at the sewing machine, show you how to sew that. Okay, now we're back at the sewing machine. So 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way down here. So we're going to line it up on the 5/8 inch mark. Using a stitch length of about 2, I'm going to use a smaller stitch length. Make it good and sturdy. And at the end, I just shorten my stitch length to get it good and secure down there. Okay, now let's take care of the other side. Again, remember 5/8 inch. We're 1/2 inches on the exterior of the bag. My stitch length down here, lock it down. Okay, now we need to box it just as we did the exterior of the bag. So we're going to take each one of these seams, and I'm going to go ahead and iron this flat the way we did the other one, and go ahead and pink the seams, and then we'll come back and we'll box it. So I'm not going to show ironing this, you've seen that. Again, iron this seam flat. You want to pink it to make it a little bit less bulky, and then we'll come back and we'll box it. So let me take care of that and I'll meet you back here. Okay, we're coming down the home stretch. So what we need to do now is sew our box ends on our lining. And one of the things you may notice is as you're trying to do this, you may have a little bit of an overhang, and that just means our cut wasn't perfect. The main thing is just get it nice and flat, and then we'll trim it a little bit more evenly after we've sewed it. So What you have to be careful of is make sure you have enough there to where the seam is not so far off on the bottom. You may have a little bit of an overlap. Okay, on this one we're going to sew a fat 1/2 inch. That means in between a 1/2 and 5/8. Because if we do 5/8 all the way around, it's going to make it probably a little bit too small. So we're going to sew a little bit smaller seam here than we did on the side seams. So go just a smidgen over a 1/2 inch. And even if you do a 1/2 inch, I think you'll be okay, because we took out some space here, so to make it a little bit tighter. So a little bit over a 1/2 inch, so I'm in between the 1/2 and the 5/8 on this. Go to a stitch length of 1 when I start. Then I'm going to go to 2. Keep that seam nice and flat as you sew over it. Getting a little bit of wrinkling right here. I'm going to try to work that out. Shorten my stitch length down to 1 to anchor the corner down good. Okay, 1 down, 3 to go. So I'm going to do the other 3 the same way, again in between the 1/2 and 5/8, and then we will do the same thing we did before. We'll cut to the edge, pink the edge, and open that seam up and press it. So let me finish this up, and I'll meet you, well, actually you've seen it done, so I'm not going to show you how to press it again, but once we've done that, we're ready to drop this into the bag and get this thing finished up. So let me finish that up, and then I'll meet you back.